Chris is now ready to talk to us. Chris from Pennsylvania, you're live on Talk Heathen. Do we have you?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey.
Awesome. Chris, what's going on?
Not much. Just trying to enjoy up the weekend.
Cool. So I see here that you want to discuss the origin of morality and how it affects society. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah.
I know.
Please continue.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No.
Okay.
It's all you.
So I was asked if I was a theist, and I am. I do believe in God.
Okay.
And I think that morality is very essential to running society. I think it's very it's like the glue that holds society together. Oftentimes when I talk to atheists, they tell me that morality doesn't come from God. They do tell me that morality is something. Well, I've heard that morality was something that was evolved throughout our species as evolution occurred. I just want to ask you guys, how do you guys define morality?
Yeah, morality is kind of a tricky word. When atheists typically discuss this, they usually, at least they shouldn't, in my opinion, use the word morality, because morality kind of implies a system that we may not actually agree exists. Sin, for example, is something that most atheists are going to say isn't a thing too. So it may not be correct to say something is immoral, but it may be more correct to say something is ethical, right? And ethics being sort of a system, a guideline that can be followed. Of course, there's many different forms of ethics, and the history of moral philosophy is filled with them. You could literally spend your whole life reading about them and not get to all of them. But the point is, as far as where do ethics come from, where do our sense of right and wrong come from, I personally do believe, it is something that comes naturally, something that comes and makes sense to a society of beings that are able to communicate with each other like we do and have to live with each other in order to thrive and survive, right? And I do think actually that other animals at least have some form of right and wrong, but it's more so in the sense of what works in their best self-interest or in their own self-preservation. Like dogs, for example, you typically live in herds and will sometimes have pack mentalities and hierarchies within there because they understand following that system of ethics is going to lead to their own self-preservation, right? So it may not be right or wrong in some godly Christian sense, but it does lead to self-preservation. And I think that's how a lot of ethical systems are kind of based on.
Yeah. Couple of thoughts on my end. Firstly, I ascribe to humanism.
Yeah.
The greater good, what does the most good for most people. And we are social creatures, so I believe that what we call ethics and what may be termed morality is a product of our increasing socialization and need to be a society. Morality, not a best word in my opinion. It implies judgment.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can be judged on morality. I think only the effect of your actions should be judged. Sure. But my question to you is, Chris, how do you determine whether something that comes from the moral code you follow, you say it comes from God, how do you judge that it actually is moral?
Well, it's kind of hard to discuss that with atheists because they don't believe in God. I believe that things at the end of the day are kind of like binary. It either falls into a category of it is or it isn't. And I know, because I did want to, I'm sorry, I'll ask you a question first. That would be the way that I do it. It's binary. Either something is good or something is bad. Because, I like to think of humans like computers. And we like the fact that we process things kind of similar to computers. When you have a computer, you give it instructions. It always comes out to a binary. There's no, in between. It either is or it isn't.
So that's interesting. You think all moral actions can be put into a binary?
Yes, I do. So the way that I look at morality is I believe that, because I know people talk about the gray area. So you have something that's good and something that's bad.
Yeah.
I think all actions fall in between, the end result of those actions fall either in between good or bad.
Right. So
now, the gray area to me.
Yeah, well, just as an example, right? Like killing people unnecessarily, for example, that would probably fall into a bad, right? Just to, give an example to your point.
I would argue that taking life is bad in general.
Okay,
Now
yeah.
the gray area for me is the intent, right? So for example, I like to use this all the time. Like if you have somebody who's poor, right, and they can't afford to eat, and maybe they're just hypothetically about to die the next day, right? And you as a good person don't want them to die, but you don't have any money, right?
Yeah.
Let's say you go into the store and you take food so they won't die, and you give them the food and they don't die. Now, I don't think anybody will debate that the act of stealing is wrong. You're taking something that doesn't belong to you from somebody else. You didn't work for that. You didn't have anything to do with that. So stealing is wrong. But the intent to save the person's life is the good thing, right?
Okay.
So I think from that point is, you would debate at that point, was that action justified?
Okay.
But I think the morality itself, the action of good and bad falls into one or the other category.
Okay, so if God, for example, were to kill a bunch of people unnecessarily, and his intent was he believed them to be, not up to his standards of what he's right or wrong, would you say that that's a bad thing to do?
So I think the context is important, because I've heard that argument many times.
So it's suddenly not a binary then.
Yeah, it's entirely subjective.
Yeah, it seems like that there's more context than just, yes or no.
In regards to what exactly?
Well, you said that all moral actions can be viewed as either correct or incorrect. And so I asked, well, if God did a moral action, specific way, it's either correct or incorrect, right, according to this view. But you seem to indicate that it's a bit more complicated.
Well, not really, because when I was talking about the person who stole from the store, the action itself is bad. So this is where atheists and Christians kind of this is where the dissonance is. You can't relate. God is supposed to be the arbiter of good in the Bible, right? Everything that's good is supposed to come from God. So all the action that he does are just. So I like to use this example, right?
I have to jump in because I have to say, I'm sorry to cut you off there, Chris, but there's so many things in that book that I find personally abhorrent. And I can't disguise that. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And they are, as a direct result, or on the orders of God. And to the point where he overrides the natural in Numbers 23? When they go and take out the Midianites.
I'm sorry, what chapter did you say? You said Numbers 23?
Numbers. I'm not absolute Bible scholar, but it's the famous story of Moses commanding the troops to go and eliminate the Midianites because they did a plague, apparently. And they spare the women and children, and God is angry and tells Moses to tell them to kill all the women and the boy children and any of the other girls that have known a man. So that is monstrous. So if someone's going to be a proponent of that kind of action, even if I were to say, yeah, he's got a moral code, I don't want to follow that code.
Sure. Yeah. In other words, it may be that under God's system, whatever he says is right, but why should I care about what God thinks is right? Right? We can always say, well, I think what I do is right. Okay, so what? Right? We have to kind of look outside of that a little bit.
Okay. I mean, I respect the points that you guys are making. There was an example that I was given in regards to the, because you guys gave me a scenario with God commanding. I'm sorry. Can you just repeat what it was?
So
Instead of God.
If I'm getting it right, that God, as part of it's Exodus. Sorry, it's from their Exodus from their slavery in Egypt to find the Promised Land. Moses commands 1,000 of every tribe to come to war, and he gets about 15,000 guys, and they destroy an entire civilization on God's orders. They kill all the men, they burn the entire civilization to the ground, they spare the women and children, and that angers God because they didn't do a thorough enough job. So he commands the army to kill the women, the boy children, but the girl children who have not known a man, you can keep for yourself. And I think we can make an implication of what they mean by keep for yourself, and it's not a very nice implication. I doubt they're going to be scrubbing floors or only scrubbing floors. So when someone says morality comes from God, and that's an example of what he sees as moral, capital H he sees as moral, I'm like, I'm not sure I can agree with that. if I'm honest.
Oh, I'm sorry. There was a scenario before that you guys gave me. You asked me a question. I believe it was along the lines like if God killed.
Right. If God decides that he wants to kill me, for example, just says that I should die, you know, would you consider that a good thing?
So again, I think because I was given an example in regards to that, the scenario, like for example, if you have a guy, right? He, I don't want to, demonetize you guys. So I'm saying a grape. Let's say if there was a person who killed, right? You put him in jail, right? And he kept finding a way to get out, right? Because the position that I hold is something is good or bad, and for me, killing is always bad, right? But I also did say that, it's that gray area to see if it's just or not. So he keeps escaping jail. He keeps murdering. He murders people by the thousands, right? So you put him in jail again, and then he keeps breaking out. So the only solution you can do to ameliorate or just eliminate the fact that people are suffering is to kill this guy, right? I think it kind of go along with that same kind of principle. The killing itself, yes, I believe that, humans should not kill each other. That's what I believe. But again, that gray area that I'm talking about, is it just? I believe that it is just in that case because the evil that he's spreading in the world, which is the killing, the raping and all the other stuff, is going to be basically non-existent when he dies.
Sure, but
so I guess to say that.
Let's take, for example, I don't know if you believe in a literal flood, but, in the flood, right, Book of Genesis, it talks about how literally everyone on earth, except for Noah's family, was killed by God, and that has to include women, that has to include pregnant women, has to include children, right? I mean, people who weren't going out killing other people, as far as we know, were suffering from this, right? Like, to kill someone under those circumstances, I would describe that as a bad thing, right? And I want to know, would you consider that a bad thing? Because you also said, killing unjustly is wrong. And I agree with you. And I think this is an example of killing unjustly, right? These people, again, you can't, the 5-year-old child that died in that flood is probably not going out murdering people.
I didn't know that toddlers could be literally wicked.
So what is the deal here? Do you understand what I'm asking?
As far as I know, the disobedience that happens in the Bible, like a lot of people in the Bible were disobedient. So, in God's eyes, or if you believe in the concept of it being a binary, anything that goes against that. So if you go against good, it's evil. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I agree. I think killing toddlers is evil. Do you agree?
Killing toddlers in the flood?
Yep. Yeah, this should be like a no-brainer, I hope. Right? Killing toddlers in a flood is bad, right? That's evil?
I mean, again, it's a lot of context.
I don't think there needs to be context for killing toddlers in a flood. No. That's the problem, right? Look, Chris, I'm sorry to interrupt, but this is what Christianity does, okay? It justifies terrible, 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 terrible things because you feel an obligation to a God that says, this is right because I say so. That's it. There is no other justification. He's the creator. He gets to make the rules. That's it. That's all I've ever heard from Christians, and that's all I ever continue to hear. It's like, look, in any other worldview, if I said, well, my God, Perry the platypus, I don't know, it says, we should kill toddlers in a flood because they're wicked, I would hope you'd say, no, that's bad, right? Because you're not a Perry the platypusologist or whatever my followers are, and you think that that's evil because we have the capacity. This is what we mean when atheists say we talk about ethics. We have a capacity to evaluate what is beneficial for us and what is not beneficial for us. And let me tell you, it's a really simple thing. Killing toddlers in a flood, that's an easy one. Don't do it. I don't think you should do it.
And I'm not a big proponent. Wait. I would like to say this, Chris, and I'll let you speak after this, I promise. But would you take any other authority that goes with do what I say or you're dead?
So you asked me as a question?
Yeah. Would you take that authority from anyone else, anything else, any government, any person, any friend, anyone, if they threatened you with death or obedience?
Because I believe that humans are flawed.
Yeah.
So somebody could be telling me to follow something
And
that may necessarily not be for my benefit.
I believe the God of Christianity is flawed too, because I don't see how a perfect God who's perfectly good, has a perfect understanding, has any reason to kill toddlers in a flood.
Yeah, you got it right first time. It was perfect.
Yeah.
So can I ask you guys a question?
Very quickly,
I
yes.
would say, like, what in the Bible? So what in the Bible do you have an objection with, like, the things that we have to follow?
The killing toddlers part. That's I cannot make this more clear.
No.
I have an objection to this.
Let's go to the Ten Commandments.
No.
Honor thy mother and thy father. What if they're abusive? What if they're horrible people? I know people who have been utterly damaged by the people that brought them into this world. But if one is to follow God's word, you must honor them even though they beat you and burned you with cigarettes and starved you and locked you in a closet. No, I'm not going to follow those rules because they are immoral in my mind, if you want to go with morality, or unethical.
Yeah.
But that doesn't really, like, answer my question. Like, why, like, honor thy mother, thy father? Yes, you have situations where parents do that. You know, I'm not denying that. But why is that inherently a bad thing?
Because,
like, things are contextual.
He just said why it's a bad thing. Because
if your
not
parents
all
aren't deserving of honor, don't honor them.
Yeah, not all parents are created equal. You know, some parents just suck. That's it. Like, you shouldn't have to honor them.
And I apologize for getting heated.
Yeah.
It is a quite sensitive topic to me, so apologies.
No, I understand, but that doesn't like necessarily answer my question. Why you have a situation where, yes, a parent will abuse you, but I'm talking about the idea of honoring thy mother and thy father. How is that a bad thing?
Because
as an absolute rule, it's a bad. Chris, if Hitler was your dad, you don't have to honor him. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's a bad thing, right? If you're like, well, listen, I have to honor my dad because the Bible says, like, I would say, no, you don't, you know? Oh, Chris, are you still there? Oh, there you
go. Yeah, I'm still here. So, I mean, that's like, it's not really, like, answering my question. So
what are we not answering, Chris?
So, okay, can you imagine, Chris, a situation in which a pet, like, what do you mean by honoring your mother and your father? Respecting them? What does it mean to honor a mother and a father? Can you give me a definition on that?
I would say, like, going along the lines of not disrespecting them. Like, you don't have to be fond of them. Like, for the Hitler example, right?
Okay.
I would say, like.
So let me ask this.
Wait, I need to hear this. I'm sorry, Chris. What about the Hitler example, please?
So, like, for the Hitler example, right? I wouldn't say, like, for example, you don't have, because the way I view respect is to hold something in high regard. I don't think that's what the Bible means by that, because it was written in Hebrew and Greek, depending on the testament that you're looking at.
Okay.
So I would say it more aligns with the fact, like, not disrespecting that person. You know what I mean? So not going out your way to, like, I don't know if you can.
I think
lead us on here,
but if Hitler was your dad, right? Like, would you think it would be wrong if you went out of your way to disrespect him?
Me personally, I mean, I probably wouldn't do it.
Okay. That's wild, man. That's wild.
That is the difference between you and I guess. If Hitler was my dad, I would be like, yeah, man, that's, not a fan of your work. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not honoring that. So that's.
Hold on. I'm sorry. I just need to interject. The reason why I say I feel like my question is not being answered, because that's like an extreme. I feel like you could take extremes in any.
Okay. Well, let me give you a less extreme example. Chris. Okay. Let's hypothetically say you know someone who has a kid, right? And they are letting that kid run amok. They're not disciplining them. They're not properly cleaning up after them. They're feeding them nothing but junk food. They let them watch R-rated movies, even though they're 10 years old. They do, like, they're drunk around them. They do drugs around them. They're just a crappy parent. Would you respect that person to person?
You talking about the parent?
No, that person
from
who
the
is
kid's point of view.
Who is from your perspective.
Or that too.
Yeah, from your perspective, that person is a bad parent. Would you respect them as a person?
Probably not. I wouldn't probably want to hold them in any high regard at all.
Then why does their kid have to?
Huh?
Then why does their kid have to? Just because they're related? If you won't respect him, why do you demand the child has to?
Well, again, I mean, I believe that when it talks about respect is to hold something in high regard. I don't think God is going to be mad at you if you don't hold your parents in high regard. I think there's two different things.
Okay.
Again, I don't believe that the word. I'm sorry.
Well, what do
I
you,
don't believe the word respect is the same concept that we use today.
what do you think
That's
they
what I'm
meant?
saying.
Like, what do you think that rule was asking?
So, like, for example, like if you had a situation where your mom's abusing her, don't call her, FNBITCH, like something like that,
So you think it talks about don't cuss your mom out? Like that's what the Bible author's intent was?
Well, don't disrespect. Like that's one of the things that entails disrespect. That's what I mean. But I don't feel like this still answers my question. So if we like those extreme examples, if we take those out, right? How is that inherently bad to show respect to your
Because
mom?
they're not extreme examples. They happen every damn day.
There are children who live with abusive parents
but
and shouldn't have to feel obligated to listen to anything what they have to say about anything.
And in
honestly.
fact, it's damaging because if they do believe that they must honor their mother and their father, they won't do anything to get themselves out from under that awful situation.
Right.
I don't. But see, that's the thing. I feel like you can do that. You can get yourself out of those situations without having to disrespect your parents. That's what I'm saying. Like I feel like a lot of nuance and context is being missed here. I'm not saying, well, if your parents tell you to smoke weed or drink or cut yourself, listen to them. I don't think they're saying that. I'm just trying to understand, like, how is that bad for society? I mean, we would agree, like, a lot of stuff that's going on in schools today, like, kids fighting their teachers is because there's a lack of respect, not only for the parents, but the teachers as well. I think Jamie already made a great example of this, right? If you wouldn't show respect to someone who's abusing their child, why should the child show any amount of respect, period, towards their abuser? Right? Because that's all they are in that situation. They're less of a parent, less of a caretaker, and more of just an abuser, right? I don't think they're owed any amount of respect just because the Ten Commandments says so. There's no reason. But look, we really do have to wrap this up because we got to move on and talk about it. Thank you for calling us, Chris, about this. But clearly, again, this is the difference between how I used to think about ethics and morality versus how I do now. I do not feel an obligation to listen to interpretations, literal or otherwise, of a text to tell me, well, this is how you should live your life versus...
What does honor even mean?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, again, for simple questions like, is it okay to drown a toddler? I have very easy answers to that. I don't have to cite context. There's no context for that. And that is the difference between the systems that we come up with as atheists, which, again, are secular in origin, and are human-focused versus ones that demand obedience to some sort of divine higher authority that we can't see, hear, or interact with in any meaningful capacity. So there you go. That's my take on that. Hopefully, we don't have to elaborate any further.